Hello fiber friends. In today's video, I'm putting everything on hold to recreate a ready-to-wear sweater I recently became obsessed with. So if that sounds like it will be of interest to you, I hope you'll stick around. Hello and knitting friends, welcome or welcome back to the channel. I am your host, Kristen. I join you every week to talk about knitting. And today we're going to be talking about a new project that I have embarked on. This may or may not be my wisest decision. So if you have watched the recent, well, really any episode of the podcast, you'll know that I have many works in progress and not nearly enough finished objects. However, I have made the executive decision to put all of those works in progress on hold because I need to make this sweater. This is the Othello cardigan. It is sold by Sézane. I could probably just buy this sweater and not spend that much more than I would for the yarn. The sweater retails for $150 the last time I checked. I'm not going to do that. I just can't bring myself to purchase a sweater I know I could make. This is clearly an issue, but we don't have time for dealing with neuroses today. So we'll just move forward based on the premise that I just cannot purchase a sweater that I know that I could make. So this cardigan is part of Sézane's Fall 2025 knitwear collection. I have probably had my eye on it for about a month and a half and decided pretty much right away that I was going to try to make it, but took some time getting there. What I ultimately decided was that I deserved a birthday / I am not going to Rhinebeck yet again present for myself. And so I was able to purchase the yarn and start moving forward on this project. So what I want to do today is take you through my thought process, my planning process for starting this cardigan. So I'm going to take a deep dive into the cardigan with you, look at some of its elements, then I'm going to sketch it out, ballpark some estimates for measurements, that sort of thing. And then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the yarn I bought and see how I'm going to move forward because I'm not quite sure about the fabric. So let's go ahead and get started with that. All right, friends. So this is the sweater. This is the Othello cardigan. This is available from Sézane. It's $150. It says baby alpaca cardigan. I believe it has some alpaca, so 68% baby alpaca, 30% polyamide, 2% elastane. So I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about some of the features that are here and brainstorm a little bit about what I'm going to do. So we have this lovely cardigan. We can see it has a folded collar. It has a folded button band that is knit sideways. This is interesting. How would you do this and get your buttonholes to line up? I could maybe even use my sewing machine to sew buttonholes if I wanted to. And there is this cabled detail along the raglan lines. Let's pick one of the photos where we zoom in on that a little bit. So cable detail along the raglan lines, presumably on the back as well. And then this cable detail, come on, is repeated on the sleeves. Why are you not cooperating? There we go. So it's repeated on the sleeves. You can see that here. This is a very fuzzy sweater. You can definitely see that as well. And that cable detail, you can't see it here because this is tucked in. The cable detail is repeated at the hem as well. So let's see if we can find a photo where you can actually see that. So you can see it a little bit here. You can see
is just like a simple right twist, left twist cable. And it's very subtle because of how fuzzy this yarn is. And let's come down a little bit more, and you can see it here as well. Just that small column of cables running all around the hem. And so overall, we can see that this is some kind of rib stitch. But this is not true ribbing. If it were, it would not have this drape. It would be cinching inward. So, what is it? Perhaps, you can see pretty well here, perhaps this is a fisherman's rib. I don't really want to do a fisherman's rib all over sweater because I have chosen a fingering weight yarn and a mohair to create a lot of this fuzz. And even held together, that's at most going to give me something that's like a sport weight. And fisherman's rib is, the stitches are oversized because the way it works, so you generally speaking, when working in fisherman's rib, go down to at least kind of like brioche needle sizes from what you would normally do. So normally for a sport weight yarn, I would do a US 4. That would put me at a US 2. I'm not knitting a sweater with a US 2 needle. I'm not doing it. So I'm not sure how I'm going to recreate the body ribbing here. That is a big question mark. Let's see if we can see a little bit more. It looks like it has like a slightly rounded shape. There's certainly, you know, the body is straight, I think. It may, I think the body is straight, but I think that because it transitions into a full rib here at the hem, and so that's going to cinch that in a little bit, which I think was kind of why we're getting like that rounded a little bit shape at the bottom. So we've got some kind of faux rib, fisherman's rib, some kind of ribbing all over with a true rib at the hem and the cuffs, this cable detail that is repeated on the cuffs, the hem, and the raglan lines. And then we have the folded collar and folded button bands. The sleeves, a lot of these photos, the sleeves are pushed up, but I think they do have a slight, trying to find, I think looking at this one, it looks like they have a slight puff to them. So it looks like they're probably knit straight or maybe very gently tapered. And then some rapid decreases before this cable column to give them a little bit of a puff, not super dramatic. And the last thing I wanted to comment on is that the fabric looks a little bit marled. Not anything dramatic, very subtle, but it looks, at least to me, like a slightly marled effect in the yarn. So that is basically what we are working with, trying to dupe the Othello cardigan by Sézane.
All right, so the next thing I want to do is kind of sketch out a little bit what this cardigan might look like and think about what kind of measurements I'm going to be making, if any adjustments, things like that. So the biggest thing for me is that I do not typically love raglan cardigans. However, in this case, these raglan lines are kind of a key element of the design. So one possibility, and those go right up into this collar here. One possibility would be to change this so that the shaping lines are kind of at the back shoulder, like we've seen somebody said the other day it's called it has a name, but we get these, you know, we cast on for the back neck, we work this kind of trapezoid shape. I could change it to be something like that, and then those lines would be back here, but I don't know that I really want to go to all of that effort to reimagine the actual shape. So I'm gonna kind of keep it as it is. The other thing is this, based on the photos, has a pretty traditional raglan shape. Do I want to keep that? Do I want to do more of a compound raglan, which tends to increase more rapidly at first, then slower, and then more rapidly, which is often a better fit. But for now, I'm going to say I'm going to keep the basic shape that it has, and it doesn't look like the armholes are super deep, so this is going to be kind of not a close fitting sweater, because it does look to me like it has maybe 6 inches of positive ease, but it's not going to have a very long, dramatic armhole, you know, that's kind of going down, making like a more of a bat wing. We're not going to have that. So here's our ribbed hem. As I said, it looks to me like it has a little bit of a kind of a bubble shape. So I think the body is worked straight, and then this is pulling in a little bit here, and then here, right before our rib trim, we're gonna make these cables, okay? And then our sleeves, these have a little bit of an oversized fit, but then they look like they taper a bit before the cuff. We put in our cables and then our cuff. So they're fairly close fitting in sort of the shoulder area, but then it doesn't look like they're either knit very straight or there's very minimal tapering of the sleeves, which just makes it so right about here, I know it keeps doing that. Let's see if I can get it to stay focused. It puffs out just a little bit in this area. And then again, here's our front bands, that hefty folded collar, and then we've got those raglan details there. So the fit in terms of length is, it looks like it's coming down lower than I've drawn it here, but I don't really like my cardigans or any of my sweaters to really come down too low. I don't know that I'll make it quite this cropped. I might bring it down a little bit lower, but I don't think I'm going to make it as long as this is, which, looking at the models, you've got the bottom of the sweater falling almost here. That's a little long for me. That may be because these women are tucking this cardigan in. I don't ever expect to be doing that. So body length and armhole are going to be pretty traditional length, which means I'm looking at like 7.5 inches here. The body in maybe 14 inches, give or take. Sleeves are full length, so we'll definitely be doing that, and that means sleeves are about 18 inches. And the neck is coming in pretty close. So neck, it's gonna make it look like a halo. But neck circumference here, this is coming in pretty close. It does button, of course, and it has a little bit of a drop to the neck.
So this should be a little bit more down here. It looks like, I don't know, maybe 2 inches, maybe 3 for the neck drop. And then the circumference of the neck, again, it's going to be pretty close, something like 10 to 12 inches. Probably, you know, I'm going to be picking up the collar afterward, so I'll cast on a number that's going to give me 12 inches and then come in and add an inch of collar. And then, as I said, it looks like this has a fair bit of ease. I want to say 6 to 8 inches. So my bust circumference, I think we'll go with 42-ish inches, and that's going to give me about 6 inches of positive ease. And this will be the same up until we get down here. And I don't think there's probably any decreasing here. It's just coming in because of the rib. We're going to come in with maybe dropping 2 needle sizes to do the hem, which is going to help pull it in without having to add a bunch of decreases and create just a little bit of a bubble shape. So I think that is going to be my starting point.
All right, so there you have the general planning process I went through to be able to get started on this project. Now let's take a look at the yarn. So obviously I do not have access to this actual garment. I'm basing everything on photos. I don't know, does Sézane even have like actual physical stores? I have no idea. If they do, I don't know where one is. So I am not able to touch this sweater. I know that it is made from alpaca, or a high percentage of alpaca, but other than that, I don't really know anything about the fabric. That is not based on photos. I don't know how it feels. I don't know the drape. I don't know how thick or thin it is. It's all just kind of guesses. But based on the photos, I figured I would want a fingering weight yarn. It looks like a lighter fabric. And it is also, as I mentioned, a very fuzzy fabric. You can see a lot of halo. You can see, especially when I zoomed in, you can really see a lot of fuzz coming off. Now that is probably the alpaca, but alpaca, then there are some, Surrey silk, lace weight yarns out there. They're beautiful, but they tend to be much more expensive than the silk mohair. So what I decided we were going to be using is silk mohair and a fingering weight merino. So here is what I landed on. So these are yarns from Knitting for Olive. This is the Knitting for Olive merino, and this is the Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. You can see they're not the same color. They are very close. So this one is claret, and this one is Bordeaux. I wanted to mimic the slight marling that appeared in the fabric, just give the color a little bit more dimension. So I did not get matching colors, but as you can see, they are very close to each other. And in a couple of minutes, I will show you some swatches, and then you'll be able to see. I really hope my microphone is picking up because it's like way up here. Then you'll be able to see how these two colors are playing together. I was hoping to order this directly from Knitting for Olive, because even though they are now implementing like a 15% tariff charge for US customers, they also had like a 10% off first-time customer thing. So between that and ordering directly from the manufacturer, the price actually probably would have been a little bit lower than ordering it domestically. However, as I said, they were out of these two colors, and these were the two colors that I had already settled on. So I ordered this from Wool & Company, and let me check how much this cost me, because we're going to keep track of the costs for this project and see if I'm even coming in below the retail price of this cardigan. All right, I did order these from Wool & Company when they were having some kind of sale for something or other, so I did get them 10% off. So the total, and I think I got free shipping, so the total for 5 balls of each of these was $109.72, including taxes, and then I said free shipping. So I did double check. The retail cost of the cardigan is $150, and then of course there would be some shipping and taxes. So I am so far coming in lower than the retail price. But there's so much left to happen. So 5 balls of this is, so I have a little over 1,300 yards of the merino, a little bit less of this because the yardage is a little smaller. However, every project I've ever done has always used less of the silk mohair when I've held them together. So I'm hoping that's going to be okay. So I've got 1,300 yards to create this sweater. Let's talk about the fabric. So it looks like ribbing, but based on the overall structure of the cardigan and the fabric, it is clearly not a true rib. Otherwise it would be cinching and pulling in, and it is not doing that. So it can't be a true rib. So we need something that looks like ribbing. And so we've got basically 2 options, and that is a faux rib, where you have ribbing on the front and a kind of reverse stockinette kind of looking fabric on the back. I don't know if everybody calls it faux rib. I think it probably has some different names. But again, essentially you've got what looks like ribbing on the front, and then this kind of fabric on the back. So you see it is not cinching in. It is still a pretty flexible fabric. So that's what that looks like. And this obviously is the 2 yarns being held together. Let's get a nice close up. You can see in this, however, that whereas the fabric in the cardigan is it's more knit stitch forward. This doesn't really, the knit stitches are not popping as much. Now on the top part here, I tried purling the pearls so they would, twisting them, purling the pearls. I did try that. I tried purling them through the back loop, which would twist them, make them a little bit tighter. I don't really see a whole lot of difference between, let's say, the bottom half and the top half in terms of how our knit stitches are looking. And this is on a US 4. Let's add some drape. I might even go up another needle size. So that's the faux rib. This is, and it's still on here, the fisherman's rib. Now this is very knit stitch forward. Fisherman's rib is a reversible fabric, but it does not pull in like a standard rib. This is on a US 3. And you can see, while it is very knit stitch forward, these knits are still pretty chunky. Those are pretty big knit stitches. And the fabric, I think, in the cardigan looks more delicate than this. So I'm not sold on this as a good option. I could go down another needle size. I do not want to knit an entire sweater on a US 2. That sounds terrible. And then I've got to be going down to like a US 1 for all the cuffs and trim and things. That is never going to get done. If you'll recall, if you've watched the podcast, I tried to knit something, the pie camisole on a US 2 over the summer, and it's so slow. Now this would be a little bit bigger because it is like a chunky, as I said, stitch, but it's still a US 2 and it's still an entire cardigan. And I don't think I've got enough yarn because fisherman's rib really, really eats through yarn very quickly. And again, this is giving me kind of a chunky fabric that I don't love. I said no woo-woo, but she doesn't listen, so. So I don't know where to go from here. I definitely think, I mean, I could make the entire cardigan in just a stockinette, but I don't like that. I want to basically replicate this cardigan, which is again why I'm not planning to change the raglan lines, even though typically I'm not 100% sold on raglan cardigans. This is the sweater that I want. So I don't want to do it in all stockinette when it very clearly is not a stockinette sweater. But I feel like my two big options for that sort of rib texture, neither one is really working for me. So I don't know. I don't know where to go from here. I would love to hear your thoughts, whether it's about the fabric, the yarn, the needle size, the stitch pattern. The other thing is that while this, it has some halo, this is not nearly as fuzzy a fabric. However, again, I've already spent basically $110 on yarn. To get a fuzzier fabric, I could hold 2 strands of the lace weight, but that's going to cost me another $50 worth of yarn. At least, if I were to go for the fisherman's rib, as I said, I probably would not have enough yarn. I have to buy even more. So that's becoming a more expensive project. But I am really at a loss on how to move forward here. I really want to recreate this sweater. I absolutely love it, and I think it would be a fun challenge. Everything else about it is pretty simple. It's a straightforward raglan structure. The cable crosses are very simple. The math for a raglan sweater, even if I opt to do a compound raglan for one person, is relatively easy. I just can't seem to recreate this fabric in a way that is making me happy. So if you have any thoughts or suggestions, I would love to hear them. In the meantime, I'm going to keep playing around with this. I will be providing updates on my progress on this project during the regular podcast, and then I will do another part 2 project vlog when, if and when, the whole thing is finished, which I would expect to be later this year. All right, friends, that is where we are today with my new project, putting absolutely everything on hold to dupe the Othello cardigan from Sézane, and we will see what happens. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. If you found it entertaining or interesting, I hope you will give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. New knitting videos here every Saturday. If you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on Ravelry and Instagram as Media Peruana, and I will see you soon in another video.